Hi, my name is Megan Ulrich, and today I am going to be sharing with you about magnetoencephalography. Try saying that 3 times fast. And I'm also going to discuss its impacts on education. So, magnetoencephalography actually is a magnetic imaging device. So it's also called an MEG. It basically measures the number of electrons that rush to an area of the brain at specific times in which certain activities are going on in the mind. So that gives you a little bit of intro as to what it is, but I really want you to think a little bit deeper. Have you ever wondered what is going on in that little noggin of your child's? Or perhaps your brother or sister? Maybe there have been times at a restaurant when you're thinking, why did my baby just shove a french fry up his nose? Well, if you've also wondered, what if babies actually had the capacity to understand what I'm saying to them? Then you're not alone. A lot of us have wondered that. So are babies actually simple-minded like some people claim that they are? Well, actually, evidence by Dr. Kuhl, who has been researching MEGs and their impacts in education, has said that no, babies actually are far more complex than even adults are sometimes in their abilities to absorb information and pick up on phonetic cues. That's super interesting. Your babies aren't so helpless and incapable as we sometimes think that they are. So, MEGs, according to Dr. Kuhl herself, actually look like a hairdryer from Mars. And if you do look at it right about here, you can see that it does kind of look like a device that might be placed inside of a UFO or something. So MEGs actually are used to investigate brain activity, and they work by following electrically charged ions as they go from one part of the brain to another. So basically the screen will light up whenever certain aspects of the mind are being intrigued, I suppose. And then the imaging just follows the movement as it goes throughout the brain. So if the subject is, say, looking at a picture of a dog, and suddenly that dog starts barking, well, first of all, the dog barking is going to set off several different neurons within the brain. But also, just hearing the word dog is going to work in a certain compartment as well. And then MEGs, in comparison to certain other types of imaging devices, such as MRIs, fMRIs, or CT scans, actually seem to be more advantageous, simply due to the fact that it's possible for children, like infant age, actually, to be able to use them. Also, they're completely soundproof. There is no noise that comes from them whatsoever, so you're not going to freak someone out. And people who have difficulties sitting still for a long period of time, of course infants whom are known not to do that very well, they're actually able to move around freely while they're in this device. That allows for them to feel comfortable while they're also having their brain activity measured, I should say. So, Dr. Patricia Kuhl's research, she conducted research on a variety of things, one of which is 0 to 7-year-olds and kind of how they obtain their language skills. In one of her famous studies, she actually looked at a bunch of infants who were between 0 and a year old, mainly 6 to 12 months, and she was trying to figure out why it is that they are able to pick up their native language so quickly. And basically what she found out was that babies, in her words, acquire statistics of language. So they're able to hear all of the phonetic pronunciations that you and I really can't. Our brains aren't as plastic as they used to be, and we just don't really pick up on those syllable pronunciations. She also was able to do MEGs on these infants, so as to determine what kind of brain activity goes on whenever they are exposed to certain words in their language. Also, I mentioned it earlier, but the images actually light up like in pictures of the brain, so that across the board, scientists will be able to see, oh, whenever a child hears this word in their native language, it fires off in these specific parts of the brain, which shows us that we can potentially invalidate findings that suggest otherwise. The critical period. So, Dr. Kuhl and her associates actually found out that from 0 to 7 years, this is considered a critical period of language acquisition, simply because children that are within those age groups are able to obtain language so much simpler, so much quicker, and so much easier with less amount of time and energy than we as adults or teenagers would. One of the aspects of her research which determined this was that she had 1.5 to 2.5-year-olds examined to see where their skills were in speaking their language, depending on a scale of 1 to 3. Children with a 1 really couldn't speak the language very well. They were below average. 2s were just average speaking, kind of neither here nor there, but the 3s were more advanced in their language. Depending on how those children scored at 1.5 to 2.5 years old, at the age of 5 years old, how they scored when they were younger was actually a predictive factor for how well they did when they were 5. Those who were below average at the younger age were also below average compared to their peers, and those who were advanced were actually advanced compared to their peers as well. I also found, when I was conducting research, that Dale Purves found that parents who do not communicate with their children, or caregivers who do not respond to their children's social and linguistic needs at an early age, actually impacts how well they learn compared to their peers when they get older. And this is evidenced in some feral children cases, which are very sad if you've never heard of them. But in one instance, there was a 13-year-old girl who had been pretty well locked up inside of her room all of her life, and she had never even been exposed to rudimentary forms of language, such as bathroom, eat, hungry, drink, tired. She had no idea how to express any of those feelings. And even though when she was taken out as a teenager of that condition and she was taught language, she really could not obtain the language skills to be able to communicate with other people, which suggests that it is a critical period of for children to obtain language at an early age. And as you can see, maybe not very well because of screencast-o-matic, but as you can see by this graph here, this is it shows the younger ages, and this is how high of a learning ability they have to pick up like a variety of different words in their vocabulary, compared to 17-year-olds to 29 or 39-year-olds do not have a very good ability to obtain new vocabulary or learn new languages, which shows us, again, that we really need to be pushing for language skills to be obtained in our young children. So, Dr. Kuhl also did a bilingual plasticity, several bilingual plasticity experiments, and she actually found that children of English-speaking parents who were involved in several Mandarin lessons by a native Mandarin speaker were super engaged in the language lessons, even though it seemed kind of backwards. Why would they be engaged in something they can't understand? They actually were working very intently to pick up on those phonetic cues that they hadn't been exposed to before. And so this kind of brings something to mind. Based on this research, the scientists decided they were going to do some more research. They thought, well, if these children are doing this well with an actual Mandarin speaker, maybe it would just be easier for us to do it through like TV. We'll just have a Mandarin speaker speaking to them on TV, have the child focus on it for a certain amount of time. And then they did like a control group where they had a child just listening to Mandarin, but there was no videos, no native speaker on the screen. What they found actually was that children who had undergone these Mandarin lessons, like virtually, did not pick up the Mandarin language near as well as those in person. This brings to mind that social understanding possibly equals phonetic literacy. So when there's actually social communication going on, children are better able to pick up on phonetic literacy. And another experiment that was conducted is that some English children were exposed to Spanish language, and it actually turned out that those English children who were exposed to a Spanish language actually retained both languages much better and had an open window for a longer period of time to learning new languages than those who just spoke one language. So even though it seems backwards, the more language is learned at these young ages, actually the stronger their ability to retain even more languages. And then Motherese impact on acquisition. Motherese is a so-called language of mothers. So I speak Motherese when I'm talking to my son. Hopefully you guys will be able to see this. If not, you should be able to hear the recording. This is my son Benjamin. He just turned a year old, but I think this was taken when he was 8 or 9 months old. I had been working with him on saying thank you, and you can hear my Motherese in action as well as his verbal responses to my Motherese.
You're welcome. Uh-oh. Here you go. You're welcome. Thank you for saying thank you. Here. Here you go. Uh-oh. You're welcome. You're welcome.
So, as you can see there, my son obviously had been exposed to my Motherese so often that even though he was very young and it's really not expected for him to be able to say 2-word phrases at that point in time, he was able to repeat it because he had heard me saying it over and over again. This just shows how plastic little ones' minds are. They're so moldable, they can take in, it's like they're a sponge. They can just take in so much information, so much more than we really thought possible. MEGs and infants. So, while I was conducting research, I decided to do a little bit more than just Dr. Kuhl's research findings. So I actually looked up what an MEG can do in a hospital setting for infants, and I actually found out that it can make neurological advancements. So, like children who are undergoing these. And then there's compartmentalized brain pathways, so they light up whenever there seems to be something wrong. And then it can help doctors actually diagnose children who might be having a neurological disorder or something along that effect.
We were in the and up to 3 years of age.
The baby make system is a sensitive device that can pick up neural activity. It's tailored to the size of the infant with the sensitivity and spatial resolution to see the brain work in real time.
This allows us to actually see which part of the brain is active and how each activity is working and how they talk to each other. This kind of information is very useful for diagnosing abnormalities, also helping clinicians figure out exactly how to treat these kids.
We'll be able to do standard things such as localizing seizure activity, risk for autism, looking at effects of brain trauma. But in addition, there's a number of new things we can start to explore, like start to understand pain in children, trying to understand how to optimize anesthesia, how to optimize our ICU environments. The goal is to be able to tell parents what networks are at risk before they are manifest later in life. So if you know your child is going to have a learning disability.
Okay, so that video just gave a little bit of insight as to what MEGs can actually do for patients. So it can help diagnose any sort of neurological disorders. It can perhaps tell parents about like possibilities of learning disabilities due to traumatic brain injuries. And also just like with seizures, it can determine what pathways the neurons are taking that are causing that seizure, and hopefully we can find a way to flip it on its head and correct that before it becomes a lifelong issue or a brain damage issue for a child. So in my discoveries of all of this, I thought about some implications for teaching. And so if babies can crack the speech code, as Dr. Kuhl stated, which is the phonetics, the ability to understand and pick up the phonetic aspect of language, then perhaps we can also figure out how to diminish barriers between learning. So if they're able to see how children are able to pick up these aspects of language, even at such a young age when it seems like they shouldn't be capable of doing that, then we also might be able to, in the future, use that to help children who maybe have language barriers, such as those students with autism. MEGs and potential language interventions, that just basically means that if we know, based on a child's background, say he grew up in a very negative family environment, maybe he was neglected, if we know that he has had that kind of lifestyle, and like I said earlier, due to the research, it's going to impact him for the rest of his life, there are possibly ways that we can intervene to keep that from happening. So perhaps support him, offer him a scaffold by which he can level up with his peers. Neurological disruptions can possibly be rerouted, such as seizures, and not just the grand mal kind, but like the staring seizures. And then perhaps we can even figure out how to help with physical, emotional, and also neurological health. So if we can see maybe what triggers infants or children to behave the way they do in response to certain incidents of trauma or things like that, then perhaps we can help them repair that before it gets too late. Children with developmental disabilities could also be helped in this way. So perhaps interventions can be found, things that maybe work better by viewing the MEGs of their brains, that would, like maybe teaching strategies that would help them understand what we're trying to teach them better. And then teaching new languages. So obviously, if we can find out why babies are have so much more plasticity in their memories, how they're able to manipulate and learn information so much better than we can, we could possibly teach our our teenagers and other adults new languages without all of the hard work and skill that it takes. And then all of these connect to, basically, in regards to teaching, in the way that it would help us as teachers be able to understand better how our students are learning. So if we know that they're able to pick up phonetic language at a young age, perhaps we can stage more interventions at younger ages, such as something that happened through I'm going to say First Steps, but I know it's not that. Head Start. Yeah, so Head Start actually was founded to help children who seem to be at a disadvantage. But if we can find out how to help the disadvantaged students be on the same level as their peers, obviously that would be super useful in not having to differentiate instruction near as much. As we've stated in some of our discussion boards, it's a little bit time consuming sometimes. But on top of that, we can also be able to learn how to ultimately help our students in their language acquisition skills and how words connect to one another and their thought processes, maybe even in their critical thinking skills. As you can see that one department lights up when asked a serious critical thinking question in one person, but in a person who does not have normal brain functioning skills, maybe a different area lights up. We could figure out potentially why that happens and try to seek to correct it. After all, we want our students to be involved in higher order thinking skills. Well, this has been my journey on magnetoencephalography. Thank you for joining with me, and here are my references. Have a great night, and God bless you. Bye.